In 1976, a group of Chinese archaeologists found a wall. They thought it was a section of the Great Wall. It wasn't. What they'd actually found was the edge of a city. A city so large, so advanced, and built so early, that for the next 40 years, nobody could agree on who built it. Some said nomads from the steppe. Some said an unknown migrant population. One theory even suggested it wasn't built by ancestors of the Chinese people at all. The city is called Shimao. It's older than the Egyptian pyramids. It's bigger than the Forbidden City. And until very recently, its builders were a complete mystery. In late 2025, scientists finally got their answer, and they got it from DNA extracted from teeth buried in the city's foundations. They didn't just test one group. They compared it against ancient populations from across the region. Steppe herders, river valley farmers, forest hunters, everyone who could plausibly have built this place. Only one matched. And the answer wasn't what anyone expected. The mystery, why Shimao, didn't make sense. Here's why this city broke the map. Shimao sits in northern Shaanxi province, right on the edge of the Ordos Desert, a harsh, dry frontier zone. For decades, historians assumed that early Chinese civilization only took root in one place, the fertile river valleys further south and east, where the Yellow River made farming possible. The desert frontier was supposed to be the edge of civilization, not the center of it. But Shimao isn't a village. It's not even a town. Its palace complex alone covers over 400 hectares, roughly the size of 550 football fields, surrounded by massive stone walls, watchtowers, and elaborate carved stonework unlike anything found elsewhere in China at that time. And it gets stranger. Archaeologists found dozens of skulls buried in sacrificial pits near the foundations, evidence of large-scale human sacrifice on a level that seemed to belong to a totally different cultural tradition. Some of the artwork inside resembled styles from cultures over 1,000 kilometers away. So the question archaeologists had been arguing about for almost 50 years was simple: who were these people? Were they local farmers who suddenly became far more advanced than anyone expected? Or were they outsiders, a migrating population that swept in, built this fortress city, and left almost no other trace? Every theory had a problem. And without DNA, there was no way to settle it. The old theories, raising the stakes. Let's walk through what the leading theories actually claimed, because this matters for what comes next. Theory 1 ** Shimao was built by steppe-related populations, the ancestors of later nomadic groups who eventually gave rise to steppe empires. This theory pointed to the city's location on the frontier, and to some of its fortress-like military architecture, which looked more like something built by mobile, warrior-based cultures than by settled farmers. Theory 2 * Shimao was the result of a long-distance migration, a population that had moved in from somewhere else entirely, possibly even from outside what's now China, bringing with them building techniques and artistic styles nobody local had ever used before. Theory 3, and this was the quieter, more controversial one, was that Shimao represented a completely separate origin point for Chinese civilization. Not a branch of the Yellow River story everyone had been taught. A different route entirely. If Theory 3 were true, it would mean the standard timeline of Chinese civilization, the one taught in every textbook, starting neatly with the Yellow River Basin, was incomplete. Maybe even wrong. That's what was actually at stake here. Not just who built one city. The identity of an entire civilization's origin story. So in 2025, a team led by geneticist Qiaomei, one of the most respected ancient DNA researchers in the world, decided to stop guessing and start sequencing. The study, how they tested every possibility. Here's what makes this study different from a lot of ancient DNA research you've probably seen covered before. They didn't just sequence a few skeletons and call it done. They built a comparison set. The team extracted genetic material from individuals buried at Shimao, then compared it against genomes from every major population group that could plausibly explain the city's origins: northern Yangshao farming communities, populations from the Mongolian steppe, groups from the Yellow River Bend, and outlier populations from further afield that earlier archaeologists had pointed to as possible sources. This is the genetic equivalent of a police lineup. You don't just check one suspect. You put every plausible candidate in the room and let the evidence pick the match. And for months, the results stayed unpublished because, according to people close to the project, the initial data kept producing the same answer over and over, and the team wanted to be certain before going public with something this significant. Because here's the thing about ancient DNA studies like this. Once you publish, you can't take it back. If this result was going to overturn one of the leading theories about how Chinese civilization began, it needed to be airtight. So they ran it again. And again. The result held. Asterisk, on-screen text, they ran it again. And again. Star. The reveal, what the DNA actually showed. The people of Shimao weren't outsiders. They weren't steppe nomads. They weren't a mysterious migrant population from somewhere else. Genetically, the builders of Shimao matched the local Yangsha-related population of northern Shaanxi, the same broad ancestral group tied to other early farming cultures along the Yellow River system. In other words, the people who built one of the most sophisticated, mysterious fortress cities in early Chinese history were the descendants of local farmers, not foreign conquerors or wandering nomads. But, and this is the part that actually reopens the mystery rather than closing it, the DNA also showed something researchers weren't expecting. Despite that genetic continuity, there's evidence of interaction and exchange across a wide network, including contact with populations further north near the steppe frontier. So while the builders themselves were local by blood, their ideas, their artistic influences, and possibly their technology weren't isolated at all. Which means Shimao wasn't built by outsiders who invaded a quiet frontier. It was built by locals who were far more connected, to trade, to distant cultures, to information, than anyone assumed a frontier population could be. The mystery of Shimao was never really about who they were. It was about how much we'd underestimated them. Why this changes the bigger picture. This matters beyond one city. For decades, the story of Chinese civilization was taught almost like a single-source river, everything flowing outward from the Yellow River heartland, with the frontier regions treated as backward, disconnected, secondary. Shimao's DNA evidence suggests something closer to a network, multiple regional populations, all genetically continuous with their own local ancestors, but connected to each other through long-distance contact, trade, and shared ideas, far earlier and far more extensively than the old model allowed for. It's part of a bigger wave of ancient DNA research, from the Yellow River bend to the Central Plains, all pointing toward the same revised picture. Early Chinese civilization wasn't one line. It was a web, and Shimao, the city nobody could explain, turned out to be one of the clearest pieces of proof. So the wall those archaeologists found in 1976 wasn't the edge of the Great Wall. It was the edge of something almost nobody had accounted for, a city built by people whose blood said local, but whose lives said something much bigger. And Shimao isn't the only place this is happening. Right now, teams are running the exact same DNA comparison method on sites in the Amazon basin, in the highlands of Peru, and along ancient trade routes in Central Asia, places where the accepted origin story might be about to break the same way this one just did. If you want to know which one breaks next, subscribe, because that's exactly what we're covering here.